The Chimney Sweeper. When my mother died, I was very young, by William Blake, 1757 to 1827. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me, while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Dacre who cried when his head, that curled like a lamb's back, was shaved. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair. And so he was quiet, and that very night Tom was a-sleeping. He had such a sight, that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing they run, and wash in a river, and shine in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds, and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom, if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father, and never want joy. So Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark, and we got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. Okay, this is a poem by William Blake. Now notice he has another poem called The Chimney Sweeper, but this is a poem about the chimney sweeps. Let's see, William Blake, he's a key late 18th, early 19th century poet. Although he's different from the other romantics of that period. He writes about religion, he writes about the poor and the terrible position of the downtrodden and oppressed in society. And I think the chimney sweeps are some of the poorest and most oppressed and most abused people of British society of that time. He doesn't write poems about the beauty of nature and the countryside and things like this. His work is normally much more symbolistic, and he's using metaphor and imagery and symbolism. So, the chimney sweeper. My mother died when I was very young, and my father sold me, while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. Okay, this is about a chimney sweep. Now, in these times, chimney sweeps were very young children, young boys, and these were normally orphans who were sold to a master chimney sweep. And this is propaganda against the evils of chimney sweeps. And these boys, they had to climb up the chimneys of the rich in large houses and clean the tubes, and this was the only way that they could do it. And these children were either orphans or children who were found, and very normally these were sold by poor parents to master chimney sweeps. the children lived terrible lives, and very often they got caught in the chimney and they couldn't get out, and they died in the chimney, or they were burned, or they were suffocated in the chimneys, and they were always covered in soot, and they suffered. The incidence of cancer among these young children was very high as well, caused by living in the soot, and they were always black and always dirty, always covered in soot. So when my mother died when I was very young, and my father sold me. Okay, so my father sold me to a chimney sweep. While yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep. So the boy is so young that he can't say the sweep, 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 sweep. And this is an ironic play on words. I can't say it's a pun because it's not funny. And the boy is trying to say sweep, but he's actually saying weep, which means cry. So the boy was crying, or he was saying weep instead of sweep. And so he was sold. He was sold by his father. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. So now, having been sold to a chimney sweep, my job is to sweep chimneys and live in the soot. There's little Tom Dacre, who cried when his head, that curled like a lamb's back, was shaved. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know the soot cannot spoil your hair. Okay, now, Tom Dacre. This is probably a boy from who was a foundling. He was an orphan, or maybe he was just found on the street. He was abandoned, and he probably came from Lady Dacre's almshouse, which was near St James in central London, and these. The children who lived in these almshouses they could be adopted by the poor, and maybe this little Tom Dacre, he'd been adopted from the almshouse, and then he was sold to a chimney sweep. And anyway, Tom Dacre, he had curly hair, and his hair curled like the back of a lamb, and the master sweep shaved off his hair, and the reason for that is so that the hair couldn't catch fire, and also perhaps so that lice couldn't breed in it, although I have a feeling that the covering of soot that these children always had would make it a very difficult place for life. So they shaved off his hair. And hush, Tom. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind, don't worry. For when your head's bare, when your head's naked, you know the soot cannot spoil your white hair. So this is a little white-haired, curly white, boy with very, very blonde hair. He's very young. And the narrator, who's another of these orphans, another of these chimney sweeps, is calming him. And so he was quiet, and Tom quieted down. And that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And that night Tom had a dream, and he had a dream about thousands of boys who were chimney sweeps, Dick, Joe, Ned, Jack and many, many, many others, and they were all locked up in black coffins. And this locked up in black coffins, this this you can interpret coffins are black in many different ways. Maybe these are boys who've been trapped in the dark in the chimney and unable to escape, and who have died in the chimney, or little boys who have died from their cancer or from lack of food. These are all of these little dead chimney sweeps, and all of these little sweeps, they are dead, or maybe their lives are in the black. They live in the night, because inside a chimney there's no light. There's no light at all. It's a black place as they clean them. And also the chimney sweeps, they're always covered in soot. They're always covered in this black from the chimney. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. And an angel appeared, and this angel had a shiny key, and the angel opened the coffins and set them free. So maybe the children were enslaved in their lives of sweeping, and then when they died, they were set free by an angel. So actually dying and going to their coffin was the route to freedom, the route to happiness. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run, and wash in a river and shine in the sun. And these boys, they're suddenly in nature. They're on a flat green place, and they're jumping and laughing and running. And then they get to wash in a river. These children, they've probably never been clean. They never had the chance to wash, and they shine in the sun, and they're not in the darkness of the chimney, in the smoke of the city, but in the green and in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father and never want joy. So after washing, they left their bags. The bag is the bag to put all the soot in as they clean the chimney, and they left their bags behind, and they're naked and white, and they're free, and they rise upon clouds and sport and play in the wind. And then the angel told Tom, if you're a good boy, you can have a father. Your father will be God, because remember, Tom is an orphan. He's come from the orphanage, and you can have God as a father and always be happy. You'll never lack happiness. And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark, and got with our bags and our brushes to work. So they awoke, and it's still dark outside. And they got their bags and their brushes, and they went to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So it was a cold day, but Tom felt happy and warm by this idea of going with the angel to heaven, to having God as his father, to not living this life of slavery. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. And this last line is rather sad. It's saying that if all of the boys do what they're told to do and they don't make any mistakes, then they're not going to be punished by the master sweep, by their owner. And if they do what they're supposed to do, they needn't fear. Or perhaps if God does his duty when they die, then they know they will go to heaven, and they will lead happy lives from there on. So this is a poem about the life of a chimney sweep. It's a very, very sad thing. The Chimney Sweeper. When my mother died I was very young, by William Blake.